In 1 Corinthians 1 from verse 25, Paul says, "For the foolishness of God is wiser than human wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than human strength." Some of you have heard of Plato's Allegory of the Cave. In short, Plato simply puts down a situation where there are cavemen sitting inside a cave facing the wall of the cave. Behind them is a bridge that has fire on it. And what he is saying is that there are people who are walking on the bridge, and because of the fire, it then casts shadows on the wall of the cave. Now Plato says, assume the cavemen that are seated inside the cave facing the wall have never turned back to see what is actually happening. For them, the shadows that they see being cast on the wall of the cave are the ultimate reality that they could ever experience. For them, there is no greater reality than these shadows. But if someone was to come and turn them around, and they see that there are actually people walking across the bridge, and that there is a fire that is casting these shadows, they immediately realize that what they thought was the real and ultimate world was actually the shadow of the real thing. There's actually a bigger and a better world. And I suppose this for me is the power of what the gospel is all about. You see, this is very important for us to understand. We all live in the allegory of the cave. We as human beings are facing the wall of the cave. And in one way or the other, we have shadows that we worship and we deem as the ultimate of what life is about. For somebody else, it could be ancestral worship. For somebody, it could be different kinds of gods. For somebody, it could be even themselves, worshiping themselves as the ultimate that they could have ever known. For some people, it is materialistic things, it is education, and so on. We have these shadows that we worship, these shadows that we look at and we see as the ultimate of who we are. Now, here's where the problem comes. In history, God came down, and the Jews were the first cavemen, in the sense of the allegory, that God turned around, that they might see that there's actually a real world, a world that is bigger than the world of the shadows. Now today, it is you and I, those of us who have accepted Jesus Christ, we have been given an opportunity to turn around and to realize that all these things we have been worshiping, all these things we have been esteeming very high, all these things we thought were the ultimate of life are actually shadows. There is a real God, a real salvation, a real life that could be found in Jesus Christ. And Paul would then say what pains him is when those whom God has given an opportunity to turn around, instead of then waking up their brothers next to them and saying, hey, you need to turn around. This thing we thought was our reality is actually a shadow. We need to turn and look at Jesus. We need to turn and look at God. There is the real life. Sometimes what we do is we actually, when we've been given an opportunity to turn around and see the real thing, we actually start gloating and saying, oh my God, these guys are idiots. They don't know what I know. And Paul says this is the pain that he saw in Judaism, and this is the pain that we might see even in Christianity today, where instead of spreading the gospel, instead of going out there and saying, wake up everybody, we have been worshiping shadows, we have been looking at the shadows that are cast on the wall of the cave, we actually say, I am better. Now that I know Jesus, I am better than the rest, and they are going to burn in hell. Why? Because they don't know what I know. And so Paul says to us, that's not what the gospel is about. Now that you and I have turned around, God employs us. Please, now it is our opportunity to extend the invitation that he has extended to us, to our brothers and sisters. We should be like Luke, who wrote to his good friend Theophilus. Luke, who, when he turned around from the shadows of the cave, realized he cannot just enjoy this gospel alone. He had friends he needed to hear, he needed to know about Jesus Christ. Today, I'd like to give you and I a challenge and an invitation. We have been worshiping the shadows. We have been worshiping the fakes. We have been worshiping the non-real things of life. Now that God has turned us around, we can now see the open door to the cave. We can see that there is a bigger world to which God, to which Jesus is inviting us to. Before we walk out of this cave, before we walk into the real world to experience the sunlight, the fresh air, the singing birds, the beautiful trees, the rainbows, we should not walk out alone. Before we walk into his riches in glory, let's just make sure we wake up our brothers and sisters with whom we were in the doom and deception of confusion, and say, guys, turn around. There is something real out there that Jesus is inviting you to. How I'd love to have my family, my friends in heaven one day, to have my neighbors and everyone that I've encountered. That can only happen if I don't see the gospel as a point of glory for me, but I see the gospel as an opportunity to walk out of the cave. Let's walk out of the cave together. Let's walk out with our neighbors, with our friends, with our relatives. Take this opportunity as the caveman who has seen the light to wake up the rest of your family, your relatives and your friends, and says, we have heard the joyful sound. Jesus saves, Jesus saves. And this is what we are all about. Cavemen who have seen the real thing. God bless you.